8:37 here, Big 550 KTRS. We get into enough hot water, we won't bring that up on the air. David Stokes with us, Show Me Policy Analyst, is with us here in studio. Good morning, David, and happy St. Patrick's Day.
Happy St. Patrick's Day, McGraw and Kelly.
You and I have talked about this before, and there's some news is that President Obama has delayed some health care initiatives for 2 years, and that affects you personally, right?
It does. This is what we started talking about, I guess, 7 months ago, a little bit ahead of the curve nationally.
Right.
As usual,
right.
Exactly.
Right.
When they started canceling these low-cost, catastrophic health care policies,
right,
despite the assurances that if you liked your plan, you could keep it, because these plans didn't meet the new requirements of the Affordable Care Act
right.
and the level of service. Now they've changed it so that they're not going to enforce that for 2 more years, so that people like my family, which have these low-cost, high deductible,
right,
catastrophic-based plans, can continue. Now, I think that we should be able to keep them and use them and encourage them for far more than 2 years, but maybe this is a step in the right direction.
Okay, so what's, and I want to take it out of your personal situation, because I don't want this to be personal, so because it's just a debate. But what's the difference between a high deductible catastrophic plan and one of the plans they're offering on the national website? What's the difference in the plans besides money? I mean, because clearly the catastrophic plan doesn't cover everything the other ones do.
Well, I think they're going to be required to now, for better or worse, more or less.
Right, but for the next 2 years, you're going to be able to keep your plan that doesn't cover certain things.
It's pretty comprehensive, at least for our family.
Okay.
I mean, there's not a lot of things the big difference is the high deductible. I mean, the big difference is the $5,000 per person deductible.
Right.
That's where it's different from what you can get on the Exchange Act. I mean, you're paying you're paying the monthly insurance, and then on top of the monthly insurance, you have that $5,000, and it might be more for some others, that large deductible, which frankly means for us and most people who have this plan that you're paying for almost everything out of pocket you need during a year.
Right.
I mean, all of your health care is out of pocket. Now, you have insurance, so you're getting the benefit of the insurance negotiated prices. You know, the problem, which we all know is a problem, where the service costs $1,000. Oh, but you have insurance, so now it's $400. So now but you only owe $200.
Right.
This complex thing that nobody can really figure out.
Right.
So yeah, we still have the benefit of those lower prices through the insurance, but we basically pay everything up to $5,000 a person.
The Healthcaregov website has 3 plans in which they have a low deductible, high monthly. They have a middle range, and they have a high range. Yours, or the ones that they're allowing to keep, was even a higher deductible and a lower cost. So there was like a 4th category, if you will, that's not on the list, right?
Well, that's that was scheduled to be made illegal.
Right.
And it's a good thing that as healthcare.gov evolves, and I can't believe I'm saying something good about healthcare.gov.
Right.
It's a good thing that those type of plans are being added to it.
Right.
As people realize, as the government realizes, as markets realize, that there's a real legitimate place for them, for young, healthy people who, prior to ACA, too many might not have been covered at all.
Right. That
these are the type of plans we should be encouraging young, healthy people to get, adding them into the marketplace and getting them covered, but in a way that they shouldn't have huge health care expenses if you're young and healthy.
If the state of Missouri were to offer some catastrophic plans, you would be in favor of that, wouldn't you?
I don't like government getting involved in running these types of plans. For years, one of the problems with choice in healthcare plans was that you were never able to buy out of state. So unlike most other products where you could go and purchase across state lines, healthcare was the exception. So any one state would impose all their requirements and rules, and only a limited number of plans within that state would match that. So you were limited in what you could buy. And to the extent that that's still happening, I don't like that.
Well, but
I think we should be able to buy anywhere across the country.
Certainly, but the reason why you can't buy health insurance across state lines is because, for example, Missouri just passed the oral chemo bill. So the Republican-dominated legislature passed something forcing the health insurance companies to cover oral chemo. Now, Illinois or bordering states might not have that requirement. Therefore, it's impossible if the state legislators are going to start mandating what has to be covered. It's impossible to have Missouri and Illinois and Kansas and Oklahoma and all these other border states sort of figure out what's mandated. So it would be comparable, if Blue Cross Blue Shield wants to sell in Illinois, they most certainly can sell in Illinois, but it's a different plan only because Illinois has different requirements than Missouri.
Well, you explained it perfectly. I've been opposed a long time to those types of local mandates that limit your choice and competition all around the country.
Right, but you have to. You can't. Will you just to leave it up to the insurance company to decide what they're going to cover? How do you determine? Do you want to do away with forcing the legislature to cover things like autism as a pre-existing condition or this oral chemo?
At the state level, I don't think it's the role there for these sort of national demands, because it's been harmful that all those sort of state mandates and what we go from state to state limits your choice. And now, of course, we've gone to the Affordable Care Act, which steps in. But if we're talking about what we should have done for health care reforms prior to the Affordable Care Act, which we never really did and nobody got anything done, but at least libertarian-oriented think tanks were talking for a long time about this problem of the ban on buying across state lines, how you limited each plan down to a few in each state for these high-deductible plan types especially, and you're limiting people's choice. Limiting people's choices isn't good in any product, particularly healthcare as much as anything. And I just encourage people, Patrick Ishmael from my office has got such good writings at showmeinstitute.org about this issue, and just encourage people to check it out.
I understand, but I don't understand if you're a health insurance company, you most certainly, no one's stopping you from selling insurance in Missouri, like Blue Cross Blue Shield or Aetna or pick an insurance company. They can sell across state lines, but they're not allowed to sell the same insurance package because of the individual state mandates, right?
Right, and for years I wish they would have been able to.
But so therefore you have to come then with a standard, right? Everyone has to agree on what's being covered, right?
Well, that's what the choice we made, but I think it would have been fine in prior years to allow markets to make that decision and not government, for people to look at what that's offered at plans across the country and say, here's the plan that's right for my family.
But let's take Missouri. Missouri, the free market wasn't taking care of parents whose kids who had autism. That was considered a pre-existing condition, and it was so harmful that the Republican-led Missouri coalition got that passed. So therefore, the free market wasn't taking care of kids who had autism, and the free market wasn't taking care of this oral chemotherapy, which is deemed better for all sorts of reasons. So that the free market wasn't doing that, so the state had to step in and mandate that.
Well, 2 points. We haven't had a free market in healthcare to any extent in a long time.
Right.
And for reason, and I'm not blaming one party at all for this, but I would also comment that the market might have well been addressing those issues just more expensively than legislators thought was appropriate. I think you could have gotten autism insurance somewhere to help fund your autism, but it might have been a lot more expensive than the majority of people thought justified.
But it was deemed a pre-existing condition, so you couldn't. It wasn't sort of if you had a kid and he had autism, all of a sudden it was a pre-existing condition, and so they wouldn't cover that. Now insurance companies have to cover that, right or wrong. The free market, if you will, wasn't handling that, so the state government had to step in, which is why we can't buy Massachusetts, or Massachusetts people can't buy Missouri plans, because Massachusetts has everything covered and we only pick and choose certain things to be covered. There's got to be a standard. a basic level standard of coverage, which is what you're talking about, is catastrophic, right? So here's the basic level, and if you want that, fine. But as you know, and I know, and we both agree that there needs to be some accountability, and there needs to be, if you don't have insurance or you choose to deny insurance or you buy this plan, you've got to live with it. So if you break your leg and you don't have the money to the $5,000 for your deductible, guess what? Who covers that high deductible when you break your leg?
Well, I think people should be held responsible for that choice there. Right. And I think these $5,000 and $10,000 deductibles, they're not going to bankrupt most people. They're going to bankrupt very few people. It might be readily doable for many families, and that's why you choose those plans. It might be difficult for others, but people can pay that. I think the idea that $5,000 is so high, and you're not saying this, but I've heard other people say this, that it's so high that we can't possibly expect somebody to come up with $5,000 for a major surgery or major health care. Well, I think that's ridiculous.
I agree with you. I also find it ridiculous when people complain like I have the outrageous. I have to pay $125 a month for my health insurance. Well, first of all, who should pay for your health insurance? And secondly, $125 a month for your health insurance, that's a pretty good deal considering your cell phone bill is $150 a month.
And that's what's so good about these high deductible, lower cost plans. And I wish 10 years ago, pro athletes would have been doing commercials encouraging young, healthy people to go out and get a high deductible, low cost plan. I wish Alonzo Mourning would have been appearing on the basketball court and saying, "Hey, it's not legally required, and freedom's a good thing, so we shouldn't legally require it, but go do it anyway because it's right."
I'd like to see the state in their health exchange set up a health exchange in the state of Missouri that takes into these higher deductible catastrophic plans. Why the state, if the state wanted to, they most certainly could do that, couldn't they?
Well, I don't think they could establish a plan in there that violates the rules of the ACA now. They might be able to, through a healthcare plan, set up something for 2 more years. But then Washington, for instance, I believe has already said, well, because it's still going to be phased out eventually, we're not going to allow it within our state.
Right, I understand.
So people in Washington, the state, not the district, can't get these type of plans now because the state has said no, even though the federal government has said we'll allow it for 2 more years.
But there are higher deductible plans on the Affordable Care Act exchange. They might not be as high deductible as yours, or the ones that are being deemed, illegal now. But there's still you do have a choice.
Right. Correct.
And so how much deductible or how high that deductible is all relative, because the insurance companies set those rates and whatever else. And so the higher deductible covers more things for more people. So therefore, it has to be higher because insurance works when the cost is spread out amongst everybody else. But I'd like to see the state come in and do their own health exchange so that they could get as high a deductible plan as possible.
Well, I'll certainly agree with you, McGraw, that if the state's going to do that, that would be a great way. That would be an important thing to have in it, to say, look, as compared to other states and some states which are rejecting it, as I just mentioned about Washington, we're going to still encourage that in Missouri. That said, again, it's still being phased out in 2 years, so I think there's probably a lot of people out there who are going to say, well, I might as well not look at it now and make the short term. We were already in the plan, so we're happy to stay in it for as long as we can.
But the state of Missouri is saying we're going to have the feds write our plan as opposed to we're going to write our own plan. So that doesn't make any sense to me.
Well, I think taken alone in a silo, right. I mean, that's a good point. Taken as a part of the larger picture in opposition to enforcing Obamacare on Missouri, I understand why they're doing it.
Well, you and I will disagree. I don't know where you stand, but I am all for forcing people to buy their own health insurance, just like I'm all for everybody buying their own car insurance, and I'm forcing everybody to buy their own cell phone coverage, and people to buy their own food, and people to buy their own car. They should buy their own health insurance.
They should buy their own stuff, no doubt about it. I don't know if all these things should be a legal requirement. I don't think many of these things should be a legal requirement. But then you need to pay the costs if you take on the risks of not doing certain things.
I agree.
And the problem in healthcare is that things were subsidized, and so you never bared the brunt of your poor choices.
Having skin in the game is a good thing. We can agree on that. How we get to that, I'm sure there's all sorts of common ground between your point of view and my point of view.
Well, and there usually is when you sit down and try and work things out reasonably instead of screaming at each other.
That never works. I like screaming at people. David Stokes, when can we read you? When can we see you?
As I said, we have a healthcare policy analyst at Show Me Institute, Patrick Ishmael. He's based out of Kansas City, and he's just got a lot of very good writings on these issues at showmeinstitute.org, and I encourage people to check it out.
That's David Stokes. Good to see him, my friend.
Thanks, McGraw. Thanks, Kelly.
8:52 here. Johnny Long.